Good afternoon, everybody. At least it's already afternoon in the East Coast here in Miami. So thanks everybody for joining, for attending this webinar. At the screen you have a brief bio of myself. I've been in telecom and IT for more than 3 decades, and I'm passionate about technology. And today I will be touching a subject that is a little bit different because it does involve technology, and we will be going into that. But it also have something different, which is the financial part. Meaning, nowadays, I believe that it doesn't require much of an explanation. That all companies are scrambling to reduce costs, and telecom is obviously no exception. Actually, I will venture saying that telecom is at the forefront of most CFOs and CEOs. They are demanding cost reductions. So hopefully we will give you some good ideas on that. What is my goal for this webinar? It's on the screen. You can see my screen. I will aim to provide you with a simple but still powerful methodology that will help you reduce costs. But the key is this. It's not just about reducing costs, because you can say, it will be easy to say, you know, I can cut my cost probably in half if I reduce the bandwidth that I have for internet or any other telecom cost. But if you do that, what will be the impact in your operations? What will be the impact on your productivity or your team? So it's not that simple. So it's just not about slashing costs. We need to take into consideration what will be the impact in our operations and what will be also the impact, if at all, in the productivity. I will share with you a methodology, and that's my goal today. Here we have the agenda. We're going to touch a little bit about Convergia very briefly, then where to start in cost reduction, how to do it without compromising your operations. And as I said, we will aim to not only reduce costs, but here's the key, also to try to increase productivity at the same time, which is a challenge. A little bit about Convergia. So we are a connectivity and IoT company. We define ourselves as a passion about connectivity, anything that connects people, devices, businesses. That's who we are. That's embedded in our DNA. We were founded simultaneously in Santiago de Chile and Montreal in 1998. So we are going on 22 years already. We provide service throughout Pan America, all the way from Canada to Argentina and Chile. So when you deal with Convergia, you can rest assured that you are dealing with a company that is not only based and solid in the North America, US, and Canada, but also in many other countries, and we understand perfectly both markets, North America and Latin America. We provide services, and we cover technology with our technology more than 50 countries in 4 continents. Our team is 100 collaborators more. We have 30+ certified engineers, top certifications. We're talking about CCIA, the top certification from Cisco, and equivalents in other brands. And we have 20 or more offices. As you see on the screen, our portfolio is very complete. We have 4 pillars: anything that has to do with connectivity, and anything that has to do with cloud, data and security, and voice. Some numbers very briefly. We are part of a much larger holding, which is called Future Electronics, and is comprised of many companies. This company has been in business in 1968. So that's, as you can see, a long time. Future Electronics has alone over 6,000 employees. It covers over 50 countries and has an annual revenue of $7 billion US dollars. For Convergia, we were founded in 1998. We covered 12 countries, and we have a team of 500 people. That's it about Convergia, and I'm going to give you a sneak peek of what the methodology looks like. So hopefully this will at least pique your interest, and you will stay with me until the end of the webinar. So this is what I'm going to be doing. and I could actually do this webinar by just saying, the top 20 actions that you can do to reduce costs. But where will be the fun of that? One, and second, probably you wouldn't understand completely the methodology. So bear with me, please, and we will go, and at the end we will return to this, and I will explain it in detail. But first of all, we need to agree on a couple of things. Cost reduction, where to start? As I said, there shouldn't be any question why we need to reduce costs. Everybody wants to reduce costs, but more now nowadays with the crisis that we're living, with economics shutting down left and right or worldwide, everybody's scrambling. All companies need to reduce costs, and you see some numbers over there. This is an unprecedented economical crisis, but also a lot of analysts and economists are saying the most economies should bounce back very fast. But to do so, in order to be able to accomplish that, obviously they need to reduce costs. And as I said at the introduction, IT and telecom are the forefront. This is forcing IT and telecom CIOs, CTOs to reevaluate if they are going to remain using legacy technologies, more expensive technologies, or in some cases they are being forced by the situation to reevaluate alternatives, like for example, SD-WAN versus MPLS. That's just one case. Let's try to agree what we mean for cost, because cost could mean a bunch of different things. First of all, let's agree that the cost is not what you see on your bill. Whatever your provider bills you monthly, that's not your real cost. And there are many ways to try to find the real cost, but a proven one that has been tested again over decades is the famous TCO, the total cost of ownership. You can see on the left, it's a very well-known way to represent the cost. The iceberg, the famous iceberg, the tip of the iceberg, the part that is actually above water, is what we perceive in most cases as the cost. The hidden cost is what we know is there, but we don't usually pay much attention to it. And the sum of those two parts is our real cost. So TCO is a very nice way, a proven way to determine this. That shouldn't be much to explain here, but just as an analogy, if you think that whatever you pay for leasing your car, that's your total cost for owning a car, obviously you are oversimplifying the situation, because there are a bunch of other costs. Insurance, for one, is huge, especially in the US. It's a big part of the cost of owning or leasing a car. And also there are obviously maintenance. If you have to pay for parking spot, and the gas, the tolls, and many other things that go into the real and actual cost of owning or leasing a car. So that is exactly the same for any service, any telecom services. So the idea here is use TCO, use the total cost of ownership. And you see here some of the parts that comprises TCO. You have not only your provided MRC. MRC stands for monthly recurring charge. It's an acronym very well used within the telecom industry. So that's basically what you see in your bill. If you pull up your bill, or you look it online and you see whatever your provider is charging you, I don't know, $100 or $1,000. That's obviously a big component. Is the easiest one to figure out. You just look at your bill and you have it. But there are many others that are not so evident, but they are there for sure. Obviously, in some cases, for example, in telecom, if you are connected to the internet, you're going to require some degree of hardware, probably a router that may not be included in the bill that your provider gives you, or maybe a firewall that is for sure is not included. Those costs are related to your telecom and to your internet service. So also are the salary and wages of the people taking care of your IT or telecom team. When you need to do a move or change, that probably has a cost too. Compliance, auditing, software, security, and downtime, especially downtime. Downtime, I put it intentionally in black because that one is really hard to figure out. How do you know how much it costs to your company to be with no connectivity? Many companies have this already measured, but for others that they don't have it, it's really hard to determine a real TCO, but at least you should try to get an approximation. I forgot to mention in the previous slide, you saw also something that I'm going to go back to. As TCO is complex, always use the Pareto Principle, meaning don't try to focus on every single detail. Focus your efforts on the 20% that will yield 80% of the results. So most likely it should be fairly easy to determine where you should apply your most effort to try to get the best results in terms of cost reduction. Also critical, know where you stand. How are you supposed to start reducing costs just if you don't know what your costs really are? So first of all, you need to understand where you are right now. You need to map your costs. You need to read your contract, your SLA, your terms and conditions. And I'm going to get back to this, and you will see why this is relevant in a few minutes. Set a reduction objective. Just don't go wildly saying, okay, I want to cut my costs in whatever I can. But also be realistic. Don't expect to cut your cost in half or you reduce it to zero, because obviously that's not going to happen. And also know how much pressure you can apply to your providers. Be aware that providers are flexible, especially in times of crisis, and we're going to get back to this. But every provider has a limit, so it's well advised to know how far can you push a provider until you reach an impasse, a breaking point, and if you reach that point and you pass it, probably you will end up affecting your operations. So the second part, as I said, is not just about this. Is not just about reducing costs. Reducing costs could be the easiest part. Just try to negotiate better prices and or reduce your bandwidth, disconnect links, whatever. But how those actions will affect your operations, you have to take that into account for sure. So as part of the methodology I'm going to give you is let's try to classify the cost reduction by operational impact. Meaning we have some actions that can have zero impact. Yes, there are, and we are going to go over them in a minute. There are others that will have low impact and yet others that they will have high impact. In the bottom part, you see, for example, one of a super easy way to do cost reduction and to have zero impact in your operations is to do what is called same for less. Meaning, whatever, let's say I have 100 megabits fiber link to going to my headquarters or data center, whatever, and I am paying $1,000 for that, imagine, and if I can get that exact same service with the same bandwidth for, let's say, 900 or 800, then I have a 20% reduction cost. Basically, I'm getting the same service for less. So no operation impact. It's exactly the same service. Another one that has zero impact, it's a bit harder to get, is legacy and use services. And we have seen this time and again, just to share with you guys, we have one case in a company, a corporate, actually a big corporation, that they did an inventory and they found over $15,000 in MRC, monthly recurring charge, of unused pods. Your plain old telephone system, the copper lines that we still use for many reasons, fire alarms, and there were a bunch of them lying around, and even in cases where they have left already the particular location, nobody actually bothered to look into that. They were still paying years after the cost of a line that was completely disconnected, in the sense that there was no device connected to it. So legacy and use service is also an easy way to reduce your cost with zero impact. If we move to the low impact, willing that we are we're willing to accept a low impact on our operations, you can move from some technology to the exactly identical technology, meaning it could be the same provider, but a newer version of whatever services they're doing, or it could be a different provider, assuming that the technology is standard. On the right side, we have high impact. Those are obviously harder to implement, and we're going to go into detail. Those involve new technology, disruptive change, and usually come up with a high learning curve. So in zero impact, as I already mentioned, the same for less is the easiest one. But you have to be aware that very seldom you will get more than 10–20% reduction. If you push it, probably you will get a little bit more, but it's not very common to be able to push a provider to give you the same service, exactly the same service, or half the price. Excuse me. One thing that I cannot say enough is please enforce your SLAs, get credits. You wouldn't believe how many credits go unclaimed. It's the numbers are really high, more than 90%. More of 90%. Everybody, this is a kind of funny from, I'm speaking from the provider side, from the telecom side. Before signing a contract, most clients ask a lot about the SLA. They want to see the document. They ask how do you control it. They get into every detail of it. After the service is installed, unless you have a major outage, they don't even remember that they have an SLA. And probably I'm shooting myself in the foot as a telecom provider, but this is the truth. It's so please look at your SLAs, enforce them. If you don't have the tools to monitor it, there are a bunch of them that you can use and to measure what you're getting and what you were versus what you were offered, and see if credits apply and get them. Okay. There's also a limit, as I said. You need to know how much force can you apply to your providers, how much push, because if you push too hard, they will start cutting corners, and that can potentially compromise your operation. For example, it's not something that you may notice immediately, but if you push a provider too hard, internally that provider could move you to a different, let's call it classification of client, which you then will not have access to the immediate technical support or dispatching an engineer on the spot if you need a technical visit because they cannot solve the problem remotely. If you push for a huge discount, probably you will get put in a different kind of response time list. Okay. Also, read your contract, your SLA, your terms and conditions. Those are important, and or even better, get a subject matter to do it for you. Probably, if you work with an agent, if you're an agent attending this webinar, maybe you're already a subject matter expert, so you can advise your clients on this. But don't just sign them and leave them collecting dust. Use them. There could be a lot of situations that are favorable in terms of reduction, reducing cost reduction. So, as I said, be realistic, and also make a service inventory. Identify and use legacy service. That is 100% reduction with zero impact. Any service that you detect, that you find that is not being in use, but you're still paying for it, that is an immediate 100% reduction and zero impact. So we move to the low operational impact. Here we are willing to accept some degree of disruption or learning curve or anything that could impact our operations. If we are talking about highly standardized technology, which is, for example, voice, and in most cases, it should be easy to switch providers. So it's the same with internet, assuming that you are comparing apples to apples, meaning that you are comparing providers in the same class. Switching from one internet to another should be fairly simple. And the impact is not big because, after all, an internet is just an internet. Yeah, some people could say, yeah, but changing the IP address that belongs to the IP provider could be an issue. Yeah, I agree. And again, this is there's no one size fits all. there are some use cases that could be more complex than others. But generally speaking, switching an internet shouldn't have much of an impact on your operations. The same goes for legacy technologies. Try to move away from legacy technologies, meaning, believe it or not, there are some people that are not aware of this. They keep their technology because they are used to it and it works well and it has served them for decades. So why change it if it's working? You know, the old saying, if it broke it, don't touch it. And but if we keep that thinking like that, we will be overpaying. Why? Because if you nowadays you try to get a POTS, let's say that you want a fax machine. So you instead of doing an e-fax or virtual fax, you are dead set on having your old fax machine working. You need a POTS, and if you want the POTS, you are going to end paying a lot more money than the equivalent of voice over IP or an e-fax. The same goes for PRIs. There are still many companies out there that have legacy hardware, legacy PBX, and instead of migrating to SIP trunks or voice over IP, they keep the PRIs, and they're paying at least between 3 to 5 times more for keeping that PRI. So the message is try to move away from legacy technologies as much as possible. Also, if there are similar technology, try to migrate to. In some cases, is for example, one case is call managers, and I'm using this as a generic term, not specifically to reference the ones from Cisco. Any on-premise call manager that you may have, instead of doing a voice on the cloud, hosted PBX. The same goes for MPLS, layer 2 links, or your wavelength. And as a way to exemplify this, there are many companies that say, I have a dark fiber, and I keep asking them, do you really need that dark fiber? You know what? Because providers, telecom providers, us included, will charge you an arm and a leg for a dark fiber. So you need, you better reevaluate if you really need the dark fiber, or is something that you get from your, I don't know, storage provider that say, yeah, you know, it's better to do it with a dark fiber. But probably there are other ways to do it. In some cases, we hold on to legacy and outdated technology because we don't want to rock the boat, as I said. And it's in probably in a regular situation, the saying, if it's not broken, don't touch it, may work. But nowadays, with the crisis that we're living and the desperate necessity of having to reduce costs, this is not the time to be conservative. So moving to high impact, and adopting emerging technologies for sure will yield the big cost reduction that you can get. That's guaranteed. Just one example, replacing MPLS for SD1, you can reduce between 40 to 70% easy. But we have to be aware, obviously, that this is not as simple as it looks. It's time consuming, it involves risk. So make sure that you're selecting proven and battle tested solutions. Just don't go blindly into changing one legacy technology for something that is new without having enough reassurance that it will work. Other comment that's very valid, and I find this time and again, you know, we probably all are aware of market research tools like, for example, the famous Magic Quadrant from Gartner. So big brands are very good to have, but they are also really expensive. Look into alternatives. Define your time frame, and not all cost reductions are sustainable. So, for example, cutting on salary and wages usually has short legs. Classify your cost by financial impacts too. I'm going to go through this very fast, and but you know, there are OPEX, you know, that's operating expenditures versus CAPEX, capital expenditures. Nowadays, most people don't doubt it, and they go blindly into OPEX versus CAPEX, favor OPEX versus CAPEX, and that's usually a good way to do it. So if you are in doubt, or you have any questions, you know, if I should put more CAPEX or more OPEX, go with OPEX. All the time, we'll go with OPEX. the cloud and the subscription model of service, software as a service will always save you CapEx, and then will exchange it for OpEx. So here, towards the last part of the webinar, I said, can we actually reduce costs and at the same time increase productivity, or is that a reality of a marketing stand? Marketing, a perfect example that I want, at least one of that I like, is the photograph that you have on your screens right now. And if you're wondering what that is, that's not a real submarine, but that's a depiction of a submarine emerging through the streets of Milan in October 2010, if I'm not mistaken. So if you want, you can look it up. And it was an amazing marketing stand with a big impact from an insurance company. So can we actually do it? Well, first of all, let's understand the relationship between cost and productivity. This has been studied since probably the dawn of economy and production. So there's a very distinct correlation between your cost and your productivity. Yeah, so you need to consider very carefully how are you going to affect one and what's going to be the impact on the other. One simple way to put this is nowadays telecom is at the heart of most companies' operations. So when you have downtime, in terms of telecom, that means no emails, no phones, no access to your data, disrupted processes. In other words, probably zero productivity. So if you do a cost reduction that will increase the chances of you getting downtime, you will definitely have an impact in your productivity, but it will be a negative impact. Conversely, if you overexpand in telecom, let's say that you are super concerned about this and you double, triple your redundancy, you spend a ton of money trying to get to 100% SLA, zero downtime, which by the way doesn't exist. And you can get 99 many nines, but never 100%. So if you overexpend, most likely it will have zero impact in your productivity. You will not get more productivity out of super highly hyper secure telecom infrastructure. How do you do it? How do you get find the sweet spot? In this case, forget for a second about cost reduction and check if the change that you want to implement increases productivity. Some examples: if it provides faster, easier, or more readily access to relevant data, if it reduces downtime, if it increases security, streamlines processes, or helps you in the decision-making process, enhances teamwork and collaboration, reduce unnecessary works. Those are obviously signs that you're increasing productivity. And once you have that, if you can confirm that implementing that change that you have in mind also reduces cost, jackpot. You hit the jackpot. You have the best of both worlds. Most often than not, you will have to compromise. There's not, an ideal solution for this, but you will have to find how much of a productivity impact you want, how much of a cost impact do you want. So finally, we get to what I promised at the beginning. I'm going to share with you the methodology. About the methodology first, forward. This is based on decades of experience as both end user and as a top management executive for world-class telecom companies. So I've been in both sides of the desk. Okay, and it's simple, it's useful, it's proven, but it's by no means a panacea. Meaning that there's, as I said, and I keep repeating it, there's no one size fits all. It can vary significantly from depending on your use case, and as most planning tools, there's a good degree of subjectivity into the tool. This is what I show you initially. You will see that this version has more columns, and I'm going to show a trimmed down version. If you want to have the full tool, which is an Excel file, just write to me and to my email, and I can provide that. So let's get into the details. My top 20 cost reduction actions that you can implement, and you see this is as a traffic light. So you have your greens, your reds are your yellows, and some orange in the middle. So ideally, the best of the world will be to have a road that has everything in green. You will not find that, because obviously it's almost impossible to have something that has zero operational impact, that has a high productivity increase, that is very has low difficulty to implement, and then on top of that has a high estimated savings. So that's impossible almost. So you will find varying degrees of or green on the screen. First of all, on the left, let's go very quickly over this. The most easiest one, the easiest one is like, for example, review your SLAs, as I said, ask for due credits. That has zero operational impact. Obviously has zero productivity increase. You will not increase productivity, but it's very easy to implement, and will give you some savings, although it's probably only between 10 to 20%. As I said, more than 90% of SLAs go unclaimed. So there's a bunch of money being left on the table by the users. Second, disconnect all unused services, terminate low uses one. Again, we already explained that. There's not much to it. Just make sure that make an inventory, a detailed inventory. Renegotiate with existing providers. Keep in mind, during this time of crisis, most providers are flexible, but know how far to push. Don't overdo it, otherwise you will end up having an operational issue. Be preemptive, and in the terms of you can go before the end of the term of your contract, and you can ask for renewals and commit to longer terms. And how come? And this probably people will say, yeah, but how can I commit to longer terms? You have to be aware that there are many ways to commit to longer terms and not necessarily be entangled or with an early termination fee later. And there's that probably will need a full session to explain that, but I will mention it in a second. So another way to reduce costs, this is all administrative tasks. Sign an MSA. MSA stands for Master Service Agreements and Local Country Addendums. Why? Because you can reduce your ETFs, your early termination fees. Few people know that probably outside the US, you have a completely different regulations in terms of telecom. So there are contracts, for example, that will allow you to get out of the contract, no matter what the contract says, and you are not responsible for paying more than probably 6 months worth of ETFs. In some countries, even less. So instead of doing and aggregating all your outside the US links and signing a single contract in the US, think about signing an MSA and doing what is called local country addendum, so you will be protected and you will get benefits from the local regulation outside the US. Outside the US, also migrate to local billing and local currency. This is very important because in many cases you are paying in US dollars because it's simpler, but if you convert those to the local billing and due to the exchange rate, you will end up paying way less. And again, those are all of those are zero impact. Consolidate your billing in most favorable countries. As I said, there are many countries that will allow you to recover the sales tax. The US is one of the few countries in the world where you cannot recover the sales tax. It's some money lost. In many other countries, if the telecom providers charge you a sales tax and you have a local operation and you're billed locally, you will recover that sales tax. Okay. Also, the regulations in many other countries, as I said, are more favorable. So also migrate to legacy voice, for example, as I mentioned, POTS and PRIs to host. You will see here that's a low impact. It has a low productivity increase. It does have a productivity increase. In the full tool, you will see in a different column, and what's the case in this, you will have a much better communication. Difficult to implement is really low. The estimated savings are really high. If you can pay way less if you migrate from PRI to a SIP trunk. Migrate from cost PBX to full collaboration, for example, Teams and WebEx. And this is something that is peaking right now. It's everybody's trying to move to full collaboration. You will find time and again now that you are using less and less your desk phone and less even your cellular, your smartphone. Most of your communications, at least related to work, are going to happen over Teams, WebEx, Zoom, or any other tool like that. So try to migrate your whole teams to that, and you will save a lot of money. Just to give you an idea, you will still obviously need communication with the external world, with the PSTN, the regular telephone network, but you can get like 50% cheaper service than the usual hosted PBX if you do Teams and integrated with a PSTN. Migrate email and other non-core system to the cloud, and that is obviously also if you still have your own email exchange server, for example, migrating to Office 365 will save you a bunch of money. Do lift and replace. Anything that is not the core of your business, you can easily migrate to the cloud. Do also direct connections. This is not so well known, but big corporations are already noticing how important this is. You can save up to 20% of your cost of using bandwidth on the cloud if you, instead of going through the regular internet, you do a direct connection to the cloud. Actually all big cloud providers, Azure, Amazon, Google, Salesforce, Oracle, you name it, all of them have direct connections available. Number 13, augment or expand your existing legacy networks with SD-WAN. You can implement SD-WAN as a backup, or if you have a new location to add to your MPLS, consider adding it through SD-WAN instead of MPLS. You're going to save a lot of money. You can also replace completely your MPLS network. That obviously has a high impact, but also will yield high savings, like between 40 to 70%. Also, consolidate network appliances, meaning if you have a firewall, then you have a different hardware for a router, a different hardware for your unified threat management, your IDS, IPS, and so on. There are solutions that in a single box can provide you all of those features, all of that functionality, and you will save a bunch of money too. Replace expensive dedicated fiber pipes with aggregation of multiple cheaper links. If you do SD-WAN, you can aggregate multiple ADSLs, and they will behave the same as a huge and more expensive fiber pipe. You will get a lot of bandwidth, but for a fraction of the cost. Regarding mobility, consolidate data plans and use data plans that are designed for IoT. Don't try to use IoT devices using retail data plans. You will be wasting a lot of money. There are IoT plans that are for 1 megabit per data per month. Why? Because you are transmitting very low data in IoT in many IoT devices. So don't just go with your current provider blindly and say, okay, I want your SIM cards to put on my IoT device. Look into it into detail, because you can save a bunch of money there. Avoid roaming cards using global SIM cards. There are providers that will give you SIM cards that will auto-select whoever is the best provider at that particular, no matter where in the globe where you are right now, and they will select the best provider, not only in terms of quality, but the cheapest one. So you will have a fixed rate, no roaming charges. Avoid overage in terms of mobility. Select a provider that will give you a self-managed portal, meaning a place that you can log into or maybe use APIs to measure, monitor, and control your mobility users. So the takeaways. Define a reasonable cost reduction objective, a time frame, and an acceptable risk. Always use TCO and the Pareto Principle. Focus on the 20%. Disconnect and use services. Use all the tools at your disposal, like, for example, preemptive renewals with longer-term commitments. Remember, In many cases, especially outside the US, you can negotiate the ETFs. Even if you commit to a 3-year term, you can negotiate those terms if it comes to happen that you cannot fulfill that term. Look for more favorable regulations, probably outside the US. You can also offer revenue replacement, meaning that you find some service that you're not using, and but you are still under contract. You can negotiate with your provider and say, you know, Mr. Provider, what I want to do is I will disconnect this service, but I want instead more bandwidth or something in return. Don't accept the more for the same. This is a very classic technique that we all guilty. We use time and again. Whenever a client comes to us and say, you know, I want a cost reduction, we will say, how about this? Instead of reducing the price, instead of 100 megs, I will give you 200. That could sound really well, and probably in other situations it's a good option. But if you're looking to reduce costs, you're not reducing any costs, and most likely you're getting more than what you really need. So don't go blindly into accepting the more for the same technique. Okay, migrate away from legacy technologies. Avoid by all means vendor lock-in, because if you do, after that your negotiation capacity is completely gone. Use a subject matter expert, or even better, outsource your telecom contracts. Do contract management. There are companies, us included, that we do contract management. Claim your SLAs, and finally, find a sweet spot between cost reduction and productivity. What can we offer you today? And the last slide, and thanks for bearing with me. And migrate legacy voice to hosted PBX. We can do it. We can help you do it immediately. We can also have a full comprehensive solution for migrating hosted PBX to full collaboration suite. Like, for example, we do Microsoft Teams and Cisco WebEx. Migrate or augment or replace your existing MPLS network with a full feature managed SD-WAN. Again, you can save like 70% of your existing costs. Lift and replace whatever you can and move to the cloud. We recommend Azure, but we are cloud agnostic. We also work with AWS and Google and so on. Reduce your bandwidth cost with cloud connections, direct connections. We can connect you directly to Azure, AWS, Google, IBM, Oracle, Salesforce, and many, many others. You will save 20% on the spot. Okay. Use managed global SIM cards that we can provide you, and those are tailored for IoT and also high bandwidth. We provide contract management, meaning that even if we haven't sold you a link, we can troubleshoot the link for you. We can track your SLAs, claim your credits. We can do that for you. As I want to say, if you get into an issue and the other party brings a lawyer to the table, you better bring a lawyer too. Otherwise, even if the conversation is going to be amicable, probably the lawyer will speak a different language than you do if you're not a lawyer. Same applies to telecom. If you are dealing with a telecom company, I suggest that you get a telecom expert and that you get a company that will speak telecom for you. As much as possible, ask for local billing in local currency. We can provide you that in many countries throughout Pan America, and also we do custom project management and project designs. With that, I finished my presentation. I hope that has given you a methodology that you can use, and I would like to take any questions if there are any at this time. Anisha?
Hey Dante, you have two questions. The first is, what features must the vendor have to consider it as a full SD-WAN provider?
Okay, good question, and I will answer very briefly. First of all, look for providers that will give you a managed. My recommendation, especially if you're trying to save costs, you look for a managed solution. If a provider is trying to sell you SD-WAN, like selling boxes, like selling I don't know, this is your firewall, good luck with it, or this is a router, go figure how you install it. Probably you will end up spending way more money than you anticipate. Remember TCO. the cost is not whatever you are going to receive on the bill of the SD1. The cost is everything else. Is the salary and wages of the people, is your downtime, the time that it will take to actually implement. So, for example, in Convergia, we don't sell boxes for SD1. We offer a managed solution, and the features that you need to look is that it supports what is called hybrid one. It supports dynamic routing. It supports a strong security, and it doesn't have a single point of failure. To go into the detail of that, it will mean more time than we have, but I invite you guys to look over my webinar, which is a full webinar on SD1, and you can have a lot of detail there. The webinar is posted on LinkedIn, and you can find the link there. Also, I don't know if you have it, Yanisha, but probably you can also post the link in the chat.
Sure, I'll post the link. You have another question. What is the easiest way to convince decision makers to switch to newer technologies?
That's a tough one. Yeah, and I find time and again that decision makers are many, it depends on the personality, but many of those, especially in traditional companies, are very dead set on the technology. Let me give you an example. I was dealing with a very large law firm. They actually have hundreds of lawyers. They operate nationwide and even outside the US, and they still have PRIs. And the reason the IT guy was trying to get rid of the PRIs because he knew that he was overpaid. But the lawyers are so traditional that they wanted to have, they didn't want anything to do with the PRIs, sorry, with the voice over IP or the SIP trunks, because they didn't understand the technology. In most cases, my answer to that question is try to explain what the technology is in simple terms. Remember that you are not dealing, most of the time, you're not dealing with a guy who is a technical guru. So you have to address their concerns. Find out what those concerns are. In this case that I'm sharing with you guys, the concern was, I don't want to have any case in which my customers cannot reach me. I know that the old telephone system is old, but it works. Even if nothing is working, I have heard that friends of mine, when the internet is gone, you lose all your phones. I don't want that, and that was the main concern. By the way, a very valid concern. But if you address the concern, the root of the concern, and explain, you know, we can have dual redundant internet. We can have dual registration of C-trunks like Convergia does, and many other ways to mitigate the risk. The risk is absolutely minimal. So that way you can assuage the concerns, and most likely you will get a green light to implement the changes and achieve the cost reduction. And to finish that answer, nowadays is the best time to talk to your CEOs, to the top management of your company about this. Why? Because they know that this is the time that when they will accept even more risk if it comes attached with a big cost reduction. So make use of this time in a good sense. Okay, and I believe that we are exactly at the hour mark, Yanisha, and thank you all for attending. You have my information on the screen. Please, if anybody wants to have the full tool, the Excel, you can write to me to that email, and I will gladly share it with you. Hope it will prove helpful to you in this crisis and further along the road. Okay, thanks for attending. Thanks everybody.